I woke up in a hospital bed, heart still racing from a cardiac arrest that nearly killed me, only to find out my wife had stolen every last dollar from our joint account while I was unconscious. No warning, no explanation, just a cold text message that read, "I deserve this after everything I've done for you," with a screenshot showing our balance. $61,438.72 gone. I didn't scream. I didn't even call her. I sent her a single thumbs-up emoji. That was all she got. But what she didn't know was that I had already taken steps months ago to protect myself, and she had just walked into a trap she wouldn't see coming. Keep watching, because by the end of this story, you're going to see how the man who almost died came back stronger than anyone expected, and how karma came knocking in court with a vengeance. My name is Cameron Doyle. I'm 45, and I've spent over 2 decades behind the wheel of a semi-hauling loads from state to state, living out of truck stops and counting mile markers. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the bills paid, and my wife Dana in the lifestyle she wanted. Lately I'd been feeling pressure in my chest, kept blaming it on stress, the greasy roadside food, the endless hours behind the wheel. Until one day, somewhere outside Omaha, the pain hit so hard, I had to pull over and call 911 myself. They airlifted me to Sioux Falls, where I flatlined twice. When I came to 2 days later with tubes in my arms and a doctor telling me I was lucky to be alive, I reached for my phone. One message, no calls, just that text from Dana. And at that moment I realized I wasn't going home. But not because she took the money, because I had a plan, and she had no idea what was coming next. Lying in that hospital bed, I kept staring at the ceiling tiles like they held answers I didn't know how to ask for. The nurses had told me I flatlined twice. "You're lucky to be here," one of them said softly, like she was delivering a warning more than comfort. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow, not from the heart attack. My heart was stitched and stented back together. It was the text from Dana that broke something deeper. 15 years of marriage reduced to a cold message and a $0 bank balance, and yet instead of rage, I felt calm, numb but focused. I'd been a man who spent 3 weeks out of 4 on the road making sure the bills were paid, the savings account had stayed padded, and the truck maintenance fund never ran dry. And now the woman who never once asked about any of it decided she deserved it all. It would have been easy to spiral right there, to pick up the phone, scream, cry, demand answers. But the thing about being on the road so long is that you learn how to keep your emotions in check. There's no time to fall apart when you're hauling 80,000 pounds of steel through a blizzard in Montana. That discipline, it saved me now. The next morning, a doctor came in with a clipboard and a half smile. "No stress, no driving, no surprises," he said. 6 weeks, minimum off the road. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Doyle. Let's keep it that way." I nodded, gave him the same polite smile I gave way station inspectors, and lied. "My wife's picking me up tomorrow." She wasn't. I had no intention of going home. I waited until he left the room, then called my brother Jeff. We hadn't spoken much in the past year, not because we were angry, just life. He worked construction on the east side of Sioux Falls, divorced twice, no filter but reliable as hell. "Need a place to lay low," I told him, "for a few days, and I need you not to tell Dana I'm alive." There was a pause, just long enough to feel like a breath before a plunge. Then he said, "Got a spare room and cold beer. Come on over." That night I didn't sleep. I just laid there, remembering every small moment over the past few years that I should have paid more attention to. The way Dana had started keeping her phone face down at dinner. The new passwords on our joint accounts, supposedly for security. The weekend trips with girlfriends I'd never met, booked last minute with vague details and no return calls. I thought I was building trust by not questioning her. Turns out I was just making her job easier. When Jeff picked me up the next day, he barely said a word. Just helped me into his truck and drove in silence like he knew that anything he said might spill the dam. His place was modest, lived in with the scent of drywall dust and strong coffee baked into the air. He led me to the guest room and handed me a fresh towel. "You hungry?" he asked. I wasn't. Not for food, anyway. I was hungry for answers, clarity, and maybe revenge. But I nodded and took the sandwich he handed me just to be polite. I didn't taste a thing. "You gonna tell me what happened?" he finally asked. I showed him the text from Dana. His eyes narrowed. "You serious? She cleaned you out while you were fighting for your life." I nodded. "What are you gonna do?" he asked. "Rest," I said. "Doctor's orders." But rest wasn't what I needed. I needed to remember every single move Dana had made in the past year. Every casual comment, every skipped phone call, every document she claimed she was too busy to sign, like the mortgage refinance just 3 months earlier. That refinance had seemed innocent at the time. Interest rates dropped, and I saw a chance to lock in lower payments. Dana didn't even want to come to the meeting. "Just take care of it," she said. "You know I hate that paperwork." So I did. And for the first time since we bought the house, the mortgage was in my name alone. At the time I thought it was just convenience. Now it felt like fate. There was also the medical power of attorney. My buddy Tim had a stroke last year, and his girlfriend couldn't even make a decision about his care. That scared me. So I went to my niece, Megan Jeff's daughter, and a second-year law student, and asked for help drafting the paperwork. We made sure it was all airtight, naming me as the sole decision-maker if I were ever incapacitated. Dana never knew. She never asked, never cared. Now those details were saving my life a second time, just not in the way I expected. 3 days after I moved in with Jeff, I got a text from Harold, the neighbor back home. Just 3 words. "Everything okay, Cam?" I frowned, then saw the next message. "Saw Dana with some guy at your place. Thought you should know." I stared at it for a long time. Harold and I had shared beers on the porch, borrowed tools from each other. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The ache in my chest wasn't from the surgery. It was from waking up to a life that wasn't mine anymore. But I still had the one thing Dana never bothered to understand, the paper trail. And now it was time to follow it, step by careful step, all the way to the truth. Back at Jeff's place, the days moved slow, but my thoughts didn't. I wasn't recovering, I was calculating. Every minute I laid in that guest bed, listening to the hum of his fridge and the buzz of a ceiling fan, I was rewinding the last 2 years of my marriage. Not out of nostalgia, but strategy. Dana had played me, and while my chest still ached from the stent, it was my pride that was truly bruised. I had built a life she didn't respect, and a future she clearly never planned to share. But if she thought I'd let her walk away with everything she was about to learn, I wasn't the same man she left in that hospital bed. I remembered the refinance meeting. Clearly, Dana said she had a work call and couldn't make it, so I signed the papers alone. The loan was approved based on my income and credit. Her name wasn't on the new deed. It hadn't mattered at the time. Now it meant everything. That house wasn't ours anymore. It was mine, legally, quietly. I also remembered the medical power of attorney Megan helped me draft after Tim's stroke. I hadn't told Dana about it, but it had been filed and notarized, and it would become key to proving I was legally incapacitated when she drained our joint accounts. That afternoon I called Megan and asked her to meet me. We sat at a diner just outside of town. She pulled out a yellow folder with copies of the power of attorney and notes from the refinance. "You were smart to set this up," she said. "Most people wait until it's too late." I knotted eyes on the waitress pouring coffee at the next booth. "Well," I said, "better late than dead." Megan smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "What's your next move?" That question hung in the air like steam off the coffee. "We build a case," I finally said. "I'm not letting her get away with it." The next morning, Jeff drove me to a different branch of our bank, the main office downtown. I didn't want to show my face at the local one, where the tellers knew both Dana and me. I asked to speak to a fraud specialist. A middle-aged woman in a blazer led me into a small glass office. I showed her the text message from Dana and the screenshot of our drained account. "I was unconscious for 2 days after a cardiac arrest," I told her. "These withdrawals happened during that time. I didn't authorize them." She kept her face neutral, but her eyes told a different story, pity, maybe even a little anger on my behalf. "Given it's a joint account," she said carefully, "it may be hard to recover the funds. But if we can prove you were medically incapacitated, we can file a financial exploitation claim." I nodded. "Let's do it." She handed me a list of documents I'd need: hospital records, the power of attorney, and any communications from Dana that suggested malicious intent. I had most of it already. I thanked her, stood up, and on the way out I paused. "I want to know something," I said. "Is this common?" She looked me square in the face. "More than you'd think," she said. "People show their true colors when someone they love can't fight back. If you've ever seen someone's mask fall off when they think they've won, hit that like button. Share this with someone who's been through betrayal. And drop a comment if you think joint accounts should come with stronger protections." That evening I sat at Jeff's kitchen table and started calling in favors. First I called my trucking dispatcher and formally requested a 6-month medical leave. Then I contacted the credit union where I kept a small business account. Dana didn't know about just a side hustle I'd used for independent contracts before I went full-time on the road. I still had just over $8,200 in there. Not much, but it reminded me I wasn't entirely empty. Finally, I called Blake, Jeff's lawyer friend. He wasn't cheap, but he was sharp. The kind of guy who didn't blink when you said my wife stole everything while I was in the ICU. He told me to come by his office the next day. As I hung up, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dana. "Where are you? Your truck's not at the depot." "Did someone tell you I came by?" I didn't respond. 2 hours later, another message. "Cameron, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. We need to talk." I put the phone down without a word. That night I walked through Jeff's quiet neighborhood, stars barely visible between the streetlights. The wind was light, and the world felt oddly still. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't ache. Not because I was healed, but because I finally knew what I needed to do. She thought the money was the win. She thought taking what I built was revenge for some imagined betrayal. But the truth, Dana had just freed me. From her, from the years of cold silence, from the dinners eaten across a room filled with distance. And now that she thought I was broken, I had one massive advantage: she wouldn't see me coming. What she had taken was money. What I was about to take back was everything else. Blake's office sat in an old brick building just a few blocks from downtown. Nothing flashy, just a rusted plaque by the door and a scent of old paper inside that reminded me of courtrooms and contracts. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a glass of water, then motioned for me to sit. Tell me everything, he said, and I did, from the heart attack to Dana's message, the drained account, the refinance, the power of attorney, even the text from Harold the neighbor. He listened without interrupting, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad as I spoke. When I finished, he looked up. "You've got more leverage than you think." He flipped through the refinance documents I brought and nodded. "The house is yours. Legally, she has no claim unless she can prove fraud or deception, And based on what you've told me, you've got a clean trail." Then he tapped the printed screenshot of Dana's text. "This message helps more than she realizes. Combined with your hospital records and the power of attorney, we can argue financial exploitation while incapacitated." His tone was calm but firm, like a mechanic explaining a bad engine knock. "We'll need to act fast before she starts spending what she took. She's probably moving money already." It hit me just then this wasn't just a marital dispute. This was a financial ambush, and I was lucky to have survived long enough to fight back. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted and had to claw your way back, piece by piece, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, how would you respond if someone stole your life's work while you were unconscious? Blake began drafting the initial filings that afternoon. A fraud claim, a temporary injunction to freeze joint assets, and a formal request for discovery, so we could start unearthing everything Dana didn't want seen. I left his office with a folder full of paperwork and a strange feeling in my chest. Not the kind that sent me to the ER. This was different. This was resolve. That night I called Megan. Her internship at a local credit union had given her a front-row seat to financial patterns most people didn't even realize they were leaving behind. "You said you were helping with fraud detection reports, right?" I asked. "You think you could help me track unusual transfers or patterns in Dana's activity?" She didn't hesitate. "If the accounts are in her name, or joint accounts she accessed, I might be able to find something, especially if she was trying to hide it." I emailed her everything I had: account numbers, statements, timestamps of the withdrawals. 2 days later, she called me back. "I found something," she said. "There was a secondary account under Dana's name, opened 18 months ago, unlinked from our main bank, but still in state. Regular deposits every 2 to 3 weeks, always just under $10,000. She was avoiding federal reporting thresholds," Megan explained. "It's called structuring. Usually it's a red flag for money laundering or hiding funds." My stomach turned. Any sign of where the money was coming from, Megan hesitated. "That's the interesting part. The deposit pattern matches the weeks you were on long hauls, like clockwork." My hand clenched around the phone. "So while I was driving cross-country to keep us afloat, she was siphoning off my paychecks behind my back." The math stung more than the betrayal over $120. Tucked away in a private account while I was sleeping in truck cabs and eating out of vending machines. If you've ever had someone secretly rob you in slow motion while smiling to your face, leave a comment below. Would you confront them or build a case in silence like I did? When I hung up, I sat alone in Jeff's kitchen for a long time. The lights were off, the silence thick. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the years I gave without hesitation. It was every overnight call, every anniversary I missed because I was on the road thinking I was sacrificing for something real. Instead, I'd been building a life for someone who planned her exit a year and a half in advance. I called Blake that night and told him everything Megan found. He asked for screenshots, account summaries, anything we could document. "This is good," he said. "It proves premeditation. It's no longer just emotional fallout. It's calculated financial deception." I asked him if this would help us recover the money. "Maybe not all of it," he said, "but it will help us control the narrative in court, and that's half the battle." The next morning, another text came in. This one from Donna. "Where are you? We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I didn't answer, not because I was ignoring her, but because I knew that if I said anything, even one word, she'd find a way to twist it. She wasn't reaching out because she missed me. She was losing control, and control was everything to her. As I stared at the message, I realized something even colder. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was. But that version never existed, not really. The woman I married would never have taken from me while I was fighting for my life. The woman who did. She was a stranger, wearing a familiar face. Still, I wasn't done. The next step would come from the place she least expected. A quiet, legal play, one that would freeze her tracks before she could run. And for that, I had one more card to pull. 2 days after I handed Blake the account details Megan had uncovered, he called me back with a tone that sounded sharper than usual. "Cameron, we're filing for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow. If we wait, she could drain that hidden account or start funneling funds elsewhere. We need to freeze everything now." That urgency snapped something awake in me. Up until then, I'd been reacting calmly, quietly, but now it was time to act. Donna thought she had time. She thought I was recovering in silence. She was wrong. The next morning, I signed the last page of the injunction request with a pen that shook slightly in my hand. My blood pressure had been high again, and Jeff insisted I take it easy, but there was no resting now. We were asking the court to freeze all assets Dinah had accessed, including the hidden account. Alongside it, Blake was submitting a petition to secure temporary control of the house, citing my health condition and Dana's financial exploitation while I was incapacitated. "Judges take this kind of thing seriously," Blake said, "especially when medical records line up with financial activity." That afternoon, Megan called again. She'd gone further. "There's another name connected to Dana's secret account," she said carefully. "Not as a joint owner, but as an authorized user." I didn't say anything. I already knew the name before she said it. Harold Jensen, my neighbor, the man who texted me with fake concern. I felt my jaw tighten. He's been helping her this whole time. Megan didn't answer directly. "All I can tell you is the deposits ramped up right around the time he started coming over, more based on utility readings and driveway camera timestamps. It felt like a trap door had opened under everything I'd been standing on. I wasn't just dealing with a dishonest wife, I was up against a full-blown conspiracy. My life savings, built mile by mile on the road, was funding a secret life she was building with someone I'd once loaned a lawnmower to. If you've ever been betrayed, not just by one person, but by two, you trusted, what did you do? Share it. Sometimes the people we let into our lives quietly become the ones who do the most damage. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat outside on Jeff's porch, sipping water, replaying moments I'd ignored. The way Dana laughed too loudly at Harold's jokes during backyard barbecues. How they'd once been gone at the same time during a supposed home repair supply run. None of it registered back then, but now it all lined up. The betrayal felt complete. But strangely so did my resolve. The next morning, Blake filed the injunction. At 2:00 p.m., we stood in a quiet courtroom in front of a judge with tired eyes and silver hair. Blake presented the account evidence, the hospital records, and the text message Dana had sent while I was unconscious. Then he handed over the evidence Megan found, showing Harold as an authorized user on the account. The judge read through it all in silence. "We're requesting an immediate freeze of all liquid assets," Blake said, "and temporary exclusive use of the property until this matter is resolved." There was no response for a moment, just the shuffle of paper, the creak of a leather chair. Then the judge looked up. "Granted." That word landed like thunder. In one ruling, Dana's entire strategy had collapsed. She could no longer touch the money. She couldn't sell assets, and legally she couldn't even change the locks on the house. It was the first time since waking up in that hospital that I felt like I could breathe. On the way out of the courthouse, my phone buzzed again. Dana. The message read, "We need to talk. Just you and me. Please." I didn't respond. Whatever she had to say, it could go through Blake now. No more chances for manipulation, no more quiet apologies laced with half-truths. She'd gambled on my silence. That silence was now strategy. Back at Jeff's, I called HR at my old trucking company and inquired about the long-term disability plan I'd been contributing to for over 2 decades. "You're eligible," they told me. "Up to 60% of your income for 12 months, based on your cardiac recovery." I filed the paperwork within the hour. Another safety net Dana didn't know about. One she couldn't touch. A week later, Jeff drove me past our neighborhood. Dana's car was in the driveway. So was a sleek black Audi, one I'd never seen before, but guessed belonged to Harold. I didn't stop. I didn't go inside. I just circled the block, slow and quiet. But later that night, something inside told me I needed proof. Not just for court, but for myself. Something undeniable, something she couldn't lie her way out of. The next day, I grabbed my phone and walked a step closer toward exposing it all. 2 days after the injunction was granted, I got a call from Blake. "Dana hired Patricia Wells," he said flatly. I'd heard the name before anyone in South Dakota who had been through a messy divorce had. She was known for dragging her opponent through financial hell and coming out with everything that wasn't nailed down. If Dana was playing nice before that chapter had officially closed. I leaned against Jeff's kitchen counter, listening as Blake explained the strategy shift. "They're framing this as abandonment, claiming you disappeared after your hospitalization cut contact and left her with no explanation. They're trying to flip the narrative." That twisted logic nearly made me laugh. I'd nearly died, had my life savings stolen, and now I was the one being painted as unstable. But Blake wasn't rattled. Let them build their version. We'll dismantle it piece by piece. You've got facts on your side, Cameron. Don't lose your cool now. That wasn't going to be a problem. Cool was the only thing I had left to hold on to. That afternoon I called Megan again. "I need you to help me track anything suspicious on Dana's side, any new accounts activity that looks like she's trying to shift assets," I said. "We're ahead, but not by much." She called back that evening. She started making transfers, smaller amounts from the secret account to other personal accounts under her name. "Looks like she's trying to spread the money thin before it's all caught in the freeze." I knew the game hide just enough before the court notices. "Can you get copies?" I asked. "Already on it," she replied. Her voice was steady, like she understood how critical her work had become. The next morning I drove to the house. I knew Dana wouldn't be there. Her work hours were consistent, and I still had the keys. I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked the property line, taking photos with my phone. A brand new shed, recently installed pavers along the driveway, a decorative stone path that hadn't been there 6 months ago. All paid for during the months I was away on long hauls. All funded by money she'd secretly stolen. Harold had helped with the shed. I remembered seeing him with a tool belt and a beer when I'd pulled in from a trip last summer. Back then, I'd thought he was just being a good neighbor. Now I saw it differently. It was camouflage. I sent the photos to Blake with a one-word text, "Documented." That night, Blake called with another update. "Wells just made a settlement offer," he said, sounding almost amused. "Donna's willing to return 50% of the funds she withdrew in exchange for a 50% stake in the house." I let that sit in the air a moment before answering. So she wants to give back half of what she stole to keep half of what she doesn't own. Blake laughed once. "That's the logic. They're testing to see if you'll fold early." My advice: let them sweat. If you've ever been offered a crooked deal just to make someone else feel better, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, did you take it or walk away? I didn't reply to Dana's latest messages. They kept coming, though. "Please, we can fix this. You're blowing everything out of proportion." And then finally, "This is getting ugly. Don't make it worse than it has to be." The tone shifted from regret to threat so fast it gave me whiplash. But I stayed silent. She didn't deserve my words. She'd already taken enough. 2 days later, Jeff came home from work with a strange look on his face. "You seen Harold's place?" I shook my head. "There's a for sale sign up. Just went in this morning. That got my attention." I called Megan immediately. An hour later, she confirmed what I feared. Harold had cleared out nearly $90,000 in cashier's checks over the past week, most of it from his own home equity line. "Looks like he's trying to cash out and disappear," she said. I stared at the floor for a long time. "They're planning to run," I finally said. "She's going with him." I called Blake immediately. "We need to act now," I told him. "They're liquidating. If we wait, they'll be gone before this ever reaches court." Blake didn't hesitate. "I'll file for an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow. We'll ask the judge to freeze all remaining assets and block any property sales without court approval." That night, a new text came in from Dana. "Just you and me, no lawyers. Let's talk." It reeked of desperation. I showed it to Jeff. He read it, handed the phone back, and said, "She's scared." I nodded. "Good." I forwarded the text to Blake, who responded immediately. "Don't engage. Injunction hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow." The next day I drove to the courthouse early, parked away from the main lot, and waited. At 1:35 I spotted them, Dana and Harold, together in the parking lot arguing. Their body language said everything: tension, fear, blame. I grabbed my phone, recorded 30 seconds of the exchange from a distance. They didn't notice me. That moment wasn't about confrontation. It was about proof. They'd worked hard to keep their relationship quiet. Now I had what I needed to expose it. And in a few minutes, so would the judge. Inside the courthouse, the tension was thick before we even stepped into the judge's chambers. Blake sat beside me at the long oak table, calm but alert. Across from us, Dinah sat rigid in her chair, dressed like someone attending a funeral she didn't want to be at. Beside her, Patricia Wells flipped through papers with the confidence of someone used to winning dirty. Harold wasn't present. He wasn't a party in the divorce proceedings, but his shadow lingered in every document we brought forward. Judge Harmon entered, glasses low on his nose, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He didn't waste time. "This is an emergency hearing on the matter of financial conduct and property movement during pending divorce proceedings." Blake stood and handed over our folder. "Your Honor, we've uncovered direct evidence of concealed funds, unauthorized transfers, and asset manipulation during the petitioner's incapacitation. And now, we have visual proof that contradicts sworn statements submitted to this court." He nodded to me. I handed the bailiff my phone with the 30-second video queued up. The judge watched as Dana and Harold appeared on screen, clearly arguing in the parking lot, their faces flushed, gestures heated. No sound was necessary. Body language told the whole story. When it ended, he removed his glasses slowly and looked directly at Wells. "Counselor, would you care to explain why your client has denied any ongoing relationship with Mr. Jensen, yet appears to be in close contact, emotionally and physically, with him in this footage?" Wells cleared her throat. "Your Honor, the nature of that relationship is not relevant to the financial aspects under review. My client's emotional support system during a time of marital instability." The judge raised a hand. "Stop. What's relevant is the pattern. This court is reviewing financial misconduct, and now it appears your client has been coordinating with a third party who has also recently liquidated assets. That's not emotional support. That's concealment." Donna shifted in her seat, visibly shaken. Her fingers trembled as she folded them in her lap. I didn't look at her. There was nothing left to say. For months, she had counted on silence and misdirection, but now her entire story was unraveling in a courtroom with fluorescent lights and a man in robes who didn't seem particularly fond of liars. Judge Harmon leaned back. This court is placing a full freeze on all financial assets held by Mrs. Doyle, effective immediately. That includes the previously unreported account as well as any associated transfers. He paused, then added, Mr. Jensen is hereby barred from transferring or selling any property within this jurisdiction pending review. If he attempts to do so, criminal charges may follow. Then he turned to me. Given Mr. Doyle's medical history, the court finds merit in his petition for exclusive use of the marital home during this process. Mrs. Doyle is to vacate the property within 72 hours. Dana made a noise somewhere between a gasp and a choke. Wells reached to steady her, but the damage was done. It wasn't a final verdict, but it was the most decisive moment so far. I walked out of that courtroom without saying a word to Dana. Blake didn't even glance back. We just flipped the script, he said quietly, once we reached the sidewalk. Now they're the ones reacting. That's where we want them. If you've ever had someone lie under oath and get caught red-handed, tell me how you handled it. Did you confront them or let justice take its course? Share it below because some stories only make sense when you've lived through one yourself. Back at Jeff's, I didn't celebrate. I didn't drink. I just sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun sink below the trees. What should have felt like victory didn't. It felt like confirmation proof that everything I suspected was real. And there's something deeply sad about being right when the truth hurts more than the lie ever did. Over the next 3 days, Dana moved out. She didn't contact me directly. Everything went through Blake. Her texts stopped. So did the attempts to negotiate. When I returned to the house, it was quiet, almost sterile. Most of her things were gone. The wine glasses, the wedding photo from the hallway, the little decorative towels she insisted on buying, but never let anyone use. All vanished. But what remained told the real story, legal paperwork in drawers. She never opened financial ledgers I had kept updated in folders she always ignored. I walked from room to room with the kind of focus you get after something life-altering. I wasn't looking for closure. I was cataloging what was mine again. My truck sat in the driveway. My name was on the deed, and my niece had helped me take back what mattered most, my dignity. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Dana and Patricia Wells weren't going to fade quietly, and Harold hadn't just helped her, he'd profited. I knew if I wanted true justice, I had to take this further. I needed full discovery, every email, every deposit, every lie, because the truth didn't just belong in court. It needed to be exposed in full daylight. The day after Dana moved out, Blake called and told me discovery was officially underway. This is the part where everything gets laid out, he said. Emails, bank records, digital trails. We'll get to the bottom of it. I nodded, staring out the window of the now quiet house. It didn't feel like home yet, but it also didn't feel like hers anymore. That mattered. Megan dropped by later that afternoon with a flash drive. Everything I could get from Dana's secondary accounts, she said. There's more than we thought. I plugged it into my laptop and watched as rows of transactions filled the screen, dozens of deposits, transfers, and purchase records. Most of them were just under $10,000 like before. But what stood out were the dates. Almost every major deposit lined up perfectly with my long-haul route schedule. I'd been on the road. She'd been at the bank. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systematic, calculated. Blake reviewed the files the next day. This isn't just hiding money, he said. This is preparation. She wasn't just stealing, she was building a way out. She planned for this months, maybe years before the heart attack ever happened. That reality sank hard. While I was busting my back to keep us comfortable, she was quietly laying the groundwork to walk away rich. The more we dug, the uglier it got. Megan found 2 hotel charges in Minneapolis, both tied to Harold Jensen's name, both booked under a shared travel card. One was from 3 months ago, the same week I was in Seattle. The second was over a year back, right after Dana claimed she went on a girls' trip to visit a friend from college. That friend didn't exist. We checked. The paper trail was airtight, but what made it explosive was how carefully it had all been hidden. Separate email accounts, bank logins accessed from burner phones, a Gmail inbox linked to Dana's work calendar that included entries like property consult, WSUT-HJ, and split account planning. Harold wasn't just a bystander. He was her partner in every sense of the word. They'd been preparing to strip everything and disappear. If you've ever discovered someone building a secret life behind your back, how did you find out? What did you do when the truth came out? Leave your story below. Your words might help someone who's just waking up to the same kind of betrayal. That evening I printed the evidence and laid it all out on the dining room table. Dates, names, numbers. It looked like a crime board from a detective show. But this wasn't fiction. This was my life. A life someone else had tried to rewrite without me in it. Blake's tone shifted after seeing the documents. "We're not just looking at divorce anymore," he said. "If we can connect the dots clearly, we might have a case for criminal conspiracy and fraud, especially if any funds were used to influence property value or investment schemes." He paused. "That shed you photographed, built during one of your hospital stays, paid for from the hidden account. It hit me like a second heart attack. I'd been lying in a hospital bed fighting to live while they were building a future on my dime, right in my backyard." I asked Blake what came next. "We filed to bring Harold into the civil suit as a third-party actor. That'll open his finances for discovery, too. Then we asked the judge for a deposition." "Will they push back?" I asked. "Absolutely," he said. "But once a judge sees how deep this goes, Dana and Harold won't have much room left to stand." Jeff came by later that night, sat down with a beer, and listened while I walked him through the evidence. "She wasn't just cheating, man," he said quietly. "She was investing in her escape." That's cold. I didn't argue. It was past pain now. What I felt was purpose. The next morning, Blake filed a motion to add Harold Jensen to the discovery process and subpoena his financial records. It was the first legal shot fired in Harold's direction, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. Later that afternoon, Megan called with something unexpected. "You might want to sit down," she said. "Remember that second email Dana was using? I found a shared Dropbox folder." "What's in it?" I asked. "Photos," she said. "Financial documents, travel plans, and a draft of a lease agreement. In Minneapolis. Both their names are on it." There it was. The proof of intent. They were planning to leave together, start over, and leave me behind, broke, sick, and forgotten. But they hadn't counted on the one thing that changed everything. I didn't die. I got back up, and I got smarter. As I forwarded the lease document to Blake, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger, not even victory, just clarity, because now I knew exactly what they had built, and I was going to tear it all down, piece by piece. The motion to bring Harold into the case was approved faster than any of us expected. Blake said it was because the judge had seen enough smoke to assume fire. Within 72 hours, Harold was served with a subpoena requiring him to produce all financial statements, email communications, and any property agreements involving Dana Doyle. He didn't respond right away, which Blake predicted. Silence is their last strategy, he said. But once we drag him into discovery, the wall starts crumbling. Meanwhile, Dana's legal team grew quiet, too. No more settlement offers, no new emails, just a silence that stretched long and thin. But I knew that wasn't peace. That was retreat. They were trying to regroup. Blake told me that silence in these cases is usually when the other side realizes they've been caught with their hand in a fire they can't put out. Then came the breakthrough. Megan discovered a batch of emails between Dana and Harold that had been autosaved in her Gmail's drafts folder. Apparently, Dana had written replies and never hit send, but the drafts still stored timestamps and content. What she didn't know was that drafts sync with the cloud and leave metadata behind. One of those emails dated a month before my heart attack. Read, if he doesn't make it, everything transfers. I have power of attorney, but if he lives, we need to be ready. Start moving your accounts. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was a wildfire. When Blake read that email, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. She was preparing for you to die. If you've ever found out someone was planning for your death, like it was a financial strategy, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments, because that kind of betrayal doesn't just wound, it defines you. Blake added the email to the case file immediately. The legal classification, predatory financial intent. That phrase carries weight in divorce court, especially in states like South Dakota, where judges look closely at power imbalances during medical crises. Combined with Dana's withdrawals, the hidden account, Harold's involvement, and now this written intent, it painted a complete picture. The judge granted us another emergency hearing, this time to present evidence of potential fraud and to argue for full control over all remaining marital assets, including retroactive restitution from the hidden funds. It was set for the following week. Dana would have to appear. So would Harold. That weekend, I didn't leave the house. I combed through every paper, every bank record, every voicemail. I wasn't looking for more surprises. I was reinforcing the walls around the truth. I didn't want just to win this case. I wanted it airtight, unshakable, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. Monday morning, Blake called. They know they're beat, he said. Wells requested a private meeting. It was a sign they were trying to avoid court, hoping we'd negotiate. Do we meet? I asked. Blake hesitated, then said, We hear them out, but we don't give up ground. The meeting took place at Blake's office. Dana and Wells on one side, me and Blake on the other. Dana looked different. No makeup, hair pulled back, a plain sweater instead of her usual business dress. She didn't look at me. Wells did all the talking. My client is willing to return 70% of the withdrawn funds. She'll waive any claim to the house and vehicle, and she won't contest the divorce. In return, we ask that you drop all allegations of financial misconduct and remove Mr. Jensen from the civil claim. I looked straight at Dana. You were going to leave with him, I said calmly. Start over in Minneapolis with everything I worked for. She didn't respond, just stared at the table. Blake leaned forward. Your client's offer is noted and rejected. We're proceeding to court. They left 15 minutes later, and Blake turned to me. She's breaking. That offer was desperation disguised as compromise. If you've ever been offered hush money or a fake apology to avoid consequences, what did you do? Did you take it, or hold your ground, drop your story below? That night I stood in the backyard and looked at the shed Harold had built. What was once just wood and screws now felt like a monument to betrayal. But oddly, I didn't feel angry. I felt grounded, because I knew without question that I hadn't failed. I'd just trusted the wrong person. And there's a difference. The hearing was set for Thursday. We had everything ready. Documents, emails, recordings, timelines. Blake said the judge would have no choice but to act. After this, he said the story changes. This isn't about survival anymore, Cameron. It's about justice. And for the first time in months, I believed it. Thursday morning came with a chill in the air, though it wasn't the weather that made me feel cold. I stood in front of the mirror, tightening the same navy tie I'd used for funerals and job interviews. This wasn't a trial, not yet, but it felt like a final reckoning. Jeff drove me to the courthouse. He didn't say much, just gave me a nod when we pulled into the lot. It was the kind of quiet support I'd come to count on more than I realized. Inside, Dana was already seated with Patricia Wells. Her expression was blank, almost resigned. No anger, no panic, just someone who finally understood the walls were closing in. Harold wasn't in the room, he was downstairs, waiting for his separate testimony per court order. Blake placed a thick binder in front of the judge, labeled and indexed, with everything we'd compiled: emails, transfers, property, documents, power of attorney paperwork, and the damning draft that mentioned, if he doesn't make it. Judge Harmon didn't waste time. We are here to review the petitioner's emergency motion to establish financial misconduct, fraud and malicious intent during a period of medical incapacity. Ms. Wells, you've reviewed the documentation. She stood poker-faced. Yes, Your Honor. Do you contest its validity? A pause. We do not contest the source of the material, though we object to interpretation without testimony. That was her way of saying they couldn't deny the evidence, but they'd try to explain it away. Blake stood and walked the court through the evidence step by step. He presented the timeline: my hospitalization, Dana's withdrawals, the hidden account opened during our marriage, the matching deposit patterns during my long-haul trips, the shared lease in Minneapolis, and the unsubmitted email suggesting she had plans contingent on my death. This wasn't a marital breakdown, Blake said. This was a calculated exit plan funded by deception and executed while the petitioner was incapacitated. That's not poor judgment. That's premeditated financial abuse. Then Blake dropped the piece we'd saved for last. Your Honor, we also request to submit audio evidence taken by the petitioner on September 18th outside the courthouse. He handed the judge my phone with a file queued up. It was the video I had taken of Dana and Harold arguing. Though there was no sound, the body language had been undeniable. But the audio, Megan had enhanced it, filtered background noise, and what we recovered was enough to hit like a hammer. Dana's voice. You said once he was out of the picture, we could take care of it and go. Harold's reply. Well, he didn't die, so now we have to fix it. The courtroom fell silent. Even Wells looked down. If you've ever caught someone admitting everything they swore they'd never say aloud, what did you do next? Did you confront them, or let the truth play out in silence? Leave a comment. Your story might help someone else who's about to press play on their own recording. Judge Harmon looked over his glasses. Ms. Wells, do you wish to proceed to formal testimony, or would your client like to respond to this court directly? Dana didn't speak. She just shook her head slightly. The judge continued. Based on the totality of the evidence, this court finds probable cause for malicious financial intent. Pending further review, I am granting full temporary control of all disputed assets to the petitioner. Furthermore, this court is placing a legal freeze on all funds, in both named and related accounts, until the final division is decided. Additionally, Mr. Jensen is ordered to appear for full deposition within 10 business days. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just sat there watching Dana crumble under the weight of everything she'd built in secret. She didn't look at me once. Not when the ruling was read. Not when she stood to leave. She was no longer trying to win. She was just trying to survive it. Blake leaned over and whispered. That was the moment we turned the tide. We walked outside into the cool autumn air. Jeff clapped a hand on my back. "You look lighter," he said, like someone finally stepped out from under a storm. I didn't know what to say, because it was true. I didn't feel victorious, I felt clear, like I'd finally surfaced after being underwater too long. Back at the house, I sat alone in the living room with the binder of court documents in my lap. All those pages weren't just evidence, they were years of my life, printed and categorized. Love, trust, betrayal, survival. I flipped through them one more time and stopped on the Minneapolis lease. Both their names typed in bold at the top. 2 signatures waiting to start a new life on the ashes of mine. But they never got the chance. Because I lived. Because I fought back. That night I sat down and wrote a letter to myself. Not to send, just to remember. I wrote, they bet on your silence. You answered with truth. They counted on your weakness. You stood in court. And when they thought you were finished, you started over. There were still decisions to be made, still hearings to come. But now I wasn't fighting to survive. I was fighting to build something stronger from the ground up. The deposition was set for the following Wednesday. Harold Jensen walked into the conference room like a man trying to disappear into his own clothes. He wore a jacket that didn't fit and shoes that looked borrowed. Blake and I sat across from him with the court recorder and Dana's attorney on the opposite side. Dana wasn't present. Her absence made the tension feel colder, more focused. Blake started slow, laying the groundwork with basic questions. Full name, employment history, financial assets. Harold answered stiffly, his voice cracking once when asked about the hidden account. Then Blake moved in. "Mr. Jensen, were you aware that funds deposited into your shared account with Mrs. Doyle originated from a joint marital account held by Cameron and Dana Doyle?" Harold blinked twice, visibly sweating. "She told me it was hers, that it was safe to use." Blake didn't flinch. "Did you ever question why these transfers consistently occurred while Mr. Doyle was out of state or hospitalized?" Harold shifted in his seat. "I didn't think it was my business, but you used the funds we paid for things." "Yes. Some travel, a shed, and the lease in Minneapolis." Silence. "Mr. Jensen, is that your signature?" Blake slid the printed lease across the table. Harold nodded without looking up. "Yes." That one word changed everything. A courtroom is made of evidence, not emotion, but sometimes the silence between two truths says more than any argument. When someone admits they built their future on your pain, how do you move forward? Did you ever forgive? Or just move on? Let me know below. Your story might help someone facing the same decision. By the end of the deposition, Harold had confirmed what we already knew but needed on record. He and Dana had planned a life together, fueled by money, taken without consent. They intended to relocate, start over, and leave behind the man she'd been married to for 15 years. The transcript was handed to the court by Friday. Judge Harmon reviewed it and expedited final hearings. In the meantime, Dana's team offered another settlement, though this time she would forfeit all claims to the house truck and savings in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. She also agreed to pay all legal fees from her remaining share of the joint account. Blake called it a pre-collapse offer, a last attempt to protect what little remained of her dignity. I told him we'd accept, but only if she put it in writing and didn't show her face again. 2 weeks later, I stood in my house signing the final divorce papers. Blake slid them across the table, and I didn't hesitate. One signature ended 15 years and secured everything Dana thought she could take from me. She got her car, and 20% of the funds, what the court considered equitable. The rest came back to me. Harold disappeared after the deposition. No forwarding address. The Audi vanished from his driveway overnight. Dana stayed in town just long enough to close her accounts. Then she was gone. Word was she'd moved to Minneapolis anyway, but this time, alone. She never reached out again. I didn't expect her to. With the case behind me, I sold the house. Too many shadows lingered in its corners. I bought a smaller place near Jeff and Megan, simple, clean, quiet. I used part of the money to help Megan finish law school. She didn't ask for it, but I knew how much she deserved it. She was the one who found the account, tracked the transfers, and brought light to the lies. Blake called her the best unpaid investigator he'd ever worked with. I no longer drive long haul. My cardiologist made it clear too much stress, too much risk. So I took a dispatch position with my old company. Same industry, same people, but I'm home every night. It's quieter, steadier. There's peace in knowing where I'll sleep each evening in brewing my own coffee, instead of pouring it from a truck stop pot that's been sitting too long. Sometimes I still think about the moment I woke up in the hospital and saw Dana's message. Not because it hurts, but because it reminds me what survival looks like. I wasn't just lucky to live, I was lucky to learn. And what I learned changed everything. When someone shows you who they are in your darkest hour, believe them, then rise anyway. I found an old box in the garage last weekend, photos, ticket stubs, anniversary cards we'd once exchanged. I held on to a few, not because I wanted the memories, but because they told a story. Not of love, of warning, of trust misplaced, of strength rediscovered. Because sometimes it's not the loss that defines you, it's what you do after the fall. And I wasn't falling anymore, I was rebuilding. It's strange how much can change in a matter of months. I went from nearly dying in the cab of my truck to rebuilding a life I didn't even know I deserved. And while the scars, both physical and emotional, will never fully disappear, I've learned to see them not as damage, but as reminders. Reminders that I made it, that I kept going, that I didn't let someone else write the final chapter of my story. I don't think about Dana much anymore. Not with bitterness, anyway. There was a time when her betrayal consumed every waking thought. But now I see her for what she truly was, a lesson. She taught me that silence has power, that trusting blindly can be dangerous, and that walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you finally know your worth. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Grateful that I survived the heart attack. Grateful that I had a brother who stood by me, a niece who fought for me, and a lawyer who didn't flinch when the truth got messy. Most of all, I'm grateful that when everything collapsed, I didn't collapse with it. I stood up, I learned, and I grew. Now my days are slower, my evenings are quieter. I read more, I cook for myself. I take walks without checking the time. It's not the life I thought I was building 15 years ago, but it's the life I needed. Sometimes losing everything is how you discover what you should have had all along. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away from this, it's this. Your worth isn't defined by who walks away from you. It's defined by how you stand once they're gone. And no matter how broken you feel, there's always something worth rebuilding, especially when it's for you. Thank you for following my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your experience or let someone else know they're not alone. And if you found value in this journey, consider subscribing to the channel. Not just for stories like mine, but because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that healing is possible, that we're never truly alone in it.